This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring, ring, ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey man, just finished watching One Missed Call, 2003 Japanese movie. Literally just finished it there now. I'd seen it once before, saw it in 2010. Remember I was down in Morocco watching it during the World Cup and completely blew me away at the time. I've kind of wanted to check it out again for a long time. So we're in October now, knee deep in watching loads of horror movies, and I decided to include it in this year's slate of horror movies for October. Wanted to include a few revisits of horrors that I'd seen many, many years ago and saw some reason to revisit. Usually don't rewatch horror movies because if they're bad, then there's no point rewatching them. And if they're good, there's kind of no point having a lesser experience with them than the high impact first introduction. But because this film, when I saw it, struck me as such a unique experience, I've always kind of, I guess I haven't really found movies like it in a way, and always had it in the back of my head to just go back. And I think watching it for the first time, it really surprised me as it evolved, kind of what went on in the film, which might not make any sense to you now, me saying this, because upon this revisit, I found it to be much more conventional. But when I watched it the first time, I remember feeling like I started off the movie and I'm like, okay, sort of teen ghost movie. And then I'd get to a new type of horror movie and then a new type, and kind of felt like it always had new material up its sleeve, whether it's kind of visual manifestations of the horror element, the threat in the film, or just the type of specific subgenre that we're dealing with. So yeah, I guess watching it now without that constant sense of discovery, it does hang together as more of a generic J-horror movie. But I also remember, and I've always kind of felt this way, that it is my favorite of the J-horror boom that came out sort of late 90s, early 2000s. Maybe to some extent because I'm just not really into that style of movie. I wasn't ever a huge fan of The Ring, either the original Japanese version or the American remake. I think The Grudge was probably my favorite series, but still a lot of the Grudge movies, a lot of the Japanese ones, don't really do it for me. I remember watching Suicide Club, maybe a few others at that time, and the whole ghost thing, the Japanese ghost thing, I don't know, there's something there that just makes it not click for me. I think because it's a bit too slippery and it's a bit hard to pin down exactly what the threat is and what could happen. And I usually find the detective side of these stories more compelling than the actual horror. But maybe because One Missed Call is a bit more Western almost. It's quite fast paced compared to a lot of these films, and it's quite easy to follow. It's quite well defined compared to some of them. So yeah, it was my favorite, definitely. And I think probably still is now. Again, revisiting it after all these years it did actually really scare me the first time around. And I guess that's partly why I wanted to go back to it, because it's quite rare that a horror film really scares me. So I kind of had this in my head as like a very, very scary film. Didn't scare me really this time. There was a few bits where I felt a bit on edge, like a bit kind of apprehension. What's here? What are they going to do? But yeah, maybe I've seen a few more of these types of films since then. And maybe it's just like watching something the second time round is not as intense. Although I remembered very little. There's a few things that when we got to them that I remembered them, but for the most part, I don't remember any of this film really. I've seen a handful of Takashi Miike movies, and interestingly enough, this film would be my favorite J-horror movie, and I'm talking specifically of that era and that kind of big explosion that The Ring brought, where some of them made it to the West and then a lot of them got remade. Of that kind of ilk of film is my favorite. Also, Harakiri, Death of a Samurai, I think it's called, which was his follow-up to 13 Assassins, if I'm not mistaken. That is my favorite samurai movie. So that's two genres that he's like kind of made my favorite one of. And I think in both cases, in the case of Harakiri, Death of a Samurai, which is a remake, and One Missed Call, I think neither of those films are generally considered to be amongst the best of their genre. But yeah, they're my personal favorites. And then of course Audition's a great classic film. Ichi the Killer I like a lot as well, which is, it's hard to say that it's like my favorite of its genre because it's such a singular film. It's barely of a particular genre. I guess it's a Yakuza action movie somehow, but it's more just its own thing, and that's really good. But he also made a movie called Visitor Q, and I remember when I started watching his movies, he was one of the, probably him and Takashi Kitano both sort of became popular in the West at the same time. And I started working through Miike's filmography a little bit, or at least the ones that were kind of available to me and talked about and stuff. And I hit Visitor Q fairly early on, and it's one of the most fucked up movies I've ever seen. Like, just, it's one of the classic examples of where is the artistry here beyond shock value? And that kind of turned me off a bit. So it certainly took my interest off the boil, because his filmography is absolutely massive. I mean, I don't know how many films he's made, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's nearing 100. Like, he just absolutely churns them out. But yeah, somewhere along the way, I've ended up seeing a few of his films, and there's some definite highlights of their type of film. As I said, this was always my favorite. I would say it was my favorite Japanese horror film, full stop. And going back to it now, I think it's a really well put together film. I think it's got some, like, if you like this kind of film, I think this is, especially for a Westerner, because it works with the pacing and the style of movie and what happens on screen. It works really well to Western sensibilities. So in that regard, I think it's great. I think there's like some really slick camera work, great shots that they pull off that make it feel very cinematic and quite Hollywood at times, compared to The Grudge, for example. But yeah, I guess just this sort of surreal madness of it is something that I struggle with. It's also interesting watching it now, so removed from the introduction of cell phones into everyone's life. I mean, obviously people had them in the early 90s and the late 80s, but when this film comes out, that was when it was just like everyone had one suddenly. Well, not, I don't know about suddenly, but at that point anyway, it had reached that tipping point where it had become weird to not have one, kind of. And now we've had them for so long. I mean, I'm literally talking into one right now, and we all kind of use them throughout the day. They've become a bigger and bigger part of our lives, and they're such a fundamental tool of how we live our life. It's almost like a cup or a fork or a pillow. They've just become this really banal domestic object. I guess not banal because we do so many different complex things with them, but we take them for granted to an extent. But when this film came out, now I was maybe a bit too young to be really thinking on these levels, like sort of thinking of the before and after and all that, but I can imagine there being some sort of technophobia, anxiety about we're all connected. You've got this thing in your pocket at all times, wherever you are. You could be in the middle of nowhere, out and about, and it can connect you to anything in the world, or anyone in the world could call you and get to you. And even as I'm saying that now, I'm like, I'm not necessarily sensing how that could be taken as sinister, but just like when the internet came out and there's all these sort of scary film, like the net and all that, and I'm sure now there'll be a wave of films about AI. This feels like it's like catching cell phones or mobile phones right at that point where, you could latch on to some sort of like, you could get a number or a text could come in, an SMS could just come right into your phone, and it could be, you wouldn't know who it's from, and it could say something scary or confrontational or whatever. So yeah, it's interesting watching that now, so removed from any kind of, like, now we get like spam texts and harassment messages are so unfortunately widespread that I think some of the initial fear factor of that is gone. But I like that obviously The Ring does the same. I don't know if The Ring invented this concept of like, you watch this videotape and then within a week you die, and in this one so you get the text message and after the time limit you die, and that sort of viral nature of haunting, or I'm not sure where that comes from, if it comes from The Ring or it comes from something earlier, but it's a good device. I think at the beginning of this film, the first death that happens, we hear, first we're at that restaurant scene and she hears the message and it's her going, oh, look, it's starting to rain. And then she screams, and then we see that death play out on the bridge. One of the many, many occurrences of 2000s CGI of that like gate or like, metal wire fence or whatever snapping apart as she's walking across it. And then she says the line, oh, I think it's starting to rain. And she goes off. And I thought, okay, well, what's going to happen now is the girl that she was on the phone to, that'll be the next target. And it will just always be this sequence of you die on the phone to someone and then that person is sort of infected by it. They drop that pretty quickly. The guy that dies in the elevator shaft, he's not on the phone at the time he dies. So it's like, at times it feels like the film has a sort of rigid rule system, which is more agreeable to my sensibilities, but then constantly they break that. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think, and the issues I have about lack of rules in these J-horror movies, and the issues I have of finding them to be like too all over the place and too chaotic, I fully recognize and accept those as me problems rather than fundamental issues with the genre or shortcomings of the genre. I like my horror where I know where I stand, I might not know where the killer is, and I might not know if they're at the front of the house or at the back of the house, or if they're upstairs or they're hiding behind the couch, but I know that they're a human with a knife or whatever, they can't just teleport and do this, get into your dreams and be suddenly sinking through the ceiling or whatever, you know. So I don't know, that scares me a lot more when there's hard and fast limitations to things. But at the same time, this is a very well crafted film. I enjoy going to it. I enjoy watching it. It did scare me a lot the first time round, and I've always cited it as like a rare case of me being scared by this type of a film. So I was kind of hoping to go back to it and get that same kick out of it, but I didn't quite get there with it. But I appreciated rewatching the film. That experience I had the first time around, where I kind of kept on being surprised about the type of film that it was. I didn't quite have that this time. It felt more unified, but it is still a film that always has new things up its sleeve. So imagine like the least, the most repetitive horror film would be, you know, girl at home in like the sorority house or something gets killed, and then some dialogue scenes, then another scene of a girl on her own getting killed, and they're just like the same scene over and over again. This one, every time we get a type of kill or a type of horror set piece, we're kind of done with that. Like the first girl, well, first we've got like this creepy stuff at the restaurant where they're getting the phone calls and stuff like that. Then it's the death scene on the railway tracks, the dismemberment, you know, severed hand, texting. You know, okay, all right, now we're getting this, and then the guy going down the elevator shaft in broad daylight. It's not like a creepy nighttime horror suspense scene. It's more of like a big, crazy scene. Then we get the text with the video or the like imagery. Then it goes into this big kind of media scat. It's almost like Ace in the Hole or something. It's this huge media storm that latches onto one of the characters who's the next target. And it's funny watching it as a foreigner and not really understanding Japanese media, Japanese culture. It's harder for me to ascertain how satirical a film is being, but definitely starts to take on a bit of a Paul Verhoeven flavor, like a RoboCop or something, where the film is making fun of how vicious and carnivorous the media is, and completely doesn't give a shit about the actual well-being of its subjects, because there's a lot of that material in there, and they, you know, with all the stuff with the like the psychic, and we see so much of the sort of production of the television special and stuff. Like none of that is like it that isn't what I would expect to be getting in this film at the beginning. Especially back then, watching a few other of these J-horror movies, that all felt quite like, oh, we're really going to some bigger, more like wilder circus-like place. And when the shit hits the fan in that scene, and like the hair comes in between her ankles, around her legs, and the, you know, the psychic guy gets like thrown through the air and everything, I remember just feeling like that was much more action-packed and like just bigger, I suppose. I'm used to seeing horror scenes where there's like one victim, maybe two victims, and that's it. Not like a crowded studio full of like, you know, hundreds of people being taken on by this monster. So kind of in that way, it's a little bit like Malignant, where you don't know if you're going to get like an action horror scene, or you're going to get like some big spectacle moment, or some intimate, quiet little, you know, domestic scene. So I still really like that about the film. And when we go to the, you know, when we get then into the detective stuff, which starts to piece together the background and the family that is at the center of it all. I don't know what it is. I mean, this presumably goes back to Japanese folk tales, Japanese storytelling. It must all be rooted in that, because it seems to be all the J-horror films that I see have this this thing where it all comes down to a basic, really sad story about one family's trauma and abuse and sorrow and death and misfortune within a family. And that certainly lends a lot of sadness to these films. This month I've rewatched The Grudge, the Sarah Michelle Gellar American remake of The Grudge, which I also really enjoyed when it came out and has fallen a bit in my eyes since then. But the all the Grudge movies, be it the American or Japanese ones, and the Ring movies, and certainly this film, you spend a certain amount of the time just like really sad for the original victims at the root of all this. And I think, for example, I'm a huge fan of Scream, and Scream is a post-tragedy movie, and it's a movie about families grappling with trauma, but it's in such a fun, punchy, sexy, escapist kind of way that the film itself is never really that sad. But the Japanese ones, they definitely linger on the sadness a lot more. And by the end of the movie, I'm like, half of me is scared of these like ghost kids or ghost girls or whatever. But a lot of me is just like, I don't know, you've kind of undercut the scariness of them. Like when I'm watching Michael Myers going around killing people, I'm not thinking about how sad a life he's had. And I think if I was, I'd be less scared of him. I don't know. Maybe, but it's interesting from a cultural perspective, just seeing the difference in approach there. And it certainly makes for an intriguing plot. I just think it's weird how often it's used, but I guess it's just traditions or whatever. But yeah, like I said, it is interesting on a plot level, them piecing it together. Not that it's necessarily the most interesting story at the end of the day. It's just like this. It's the second Munchausen by proxy story that I've seen this month, both times in a film from this era, and in both cases a film I'd already seen before. But I guess that's fertile ground for horror. The stuff when we finally get to that abandoned hospital, which is, there's few horror locations better in this world than an abandoned hospital. But yeah, the stuff we get there is probably the scariest stuff in the movie. Also that shot where she sees the hands retreating into the cupboard, that's got to be one of the scariest moments. That's really scary. And the stuff, in that abandoned hospital is really good. The zombie mother turning out to not be just purely a dead body and grabbing her by the head, even though it's coming, it's still great. Like that's always a great trick to pull. The rotting corpse with the skin falling off it's camp, and it doesn't look, it's not like a fully executed visual effect, but it's also just gross enough and kind of intense and cool enough to be. I like it. It works. It adds to the film. It's a bit muddled in the sense of like, well, who is the antagonist in this movie? Because the twist then after that is that it's the real baddie is the big sister, but I don't quite understand how that works. Maybe I'm just not following it properly. Maybe it is clear in the movie and I just didn't understand it, but the mother seems to be the one with the cell phone that's calling people. It's by grabbing the phone out of her hand and sort of ending that call that the main girl survives. So the mother seems to be the villain of the piece, but then it's in the video afterwards, it's revealed that the little girl was the one who was doing the abuse, and she's the one who comes to sort of finish the job in the end. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. And then at the end of the movie, just to talk about this film sort of cycling through different genres, the very end of the movie, as in like the final sort of 4 minutes or so, we've now gone into almost like an art house horror film, like Possession or Hereditary or something like that, where it's more open to interpretation. It kind of reminds me of like The Shining or something. I don't quite know what to make of the end of the film, but I guess there's enough wildness in the film for me to not really be too eager to try and tie it up neatly with a bow. It's more of a, by the end of it, I feel like it's just kind of, it's done a lot of different things, and it's not really that important to pin down exact specifics of the movie. So yeah, I'm happy I revisited it. I know there's an American remake which isn't supposed to be very good. Might watch the trailer now and just see how it looks. I think a lot of the American remakes at this time, be they of foreign films or of 70s films, 70s American films, but a lot of those kind of like 2000s American remake horror movies are almost underrated because they were so hated on at the time, but maybe were actually kind of decent. So maybe it's worth having a look into. Also be interested to see if there's Japanese sequels to this movie. I don't think Miike has been involved, and I'm not sure how many other kind of straight up horror movies he's done. I mean, he's done so many movies, he's probably done loads. I think he did a segment of The Three Extremes, which was an anthology horror film that I saw years ago, but I can't really remember anything about. But yeah, I'm not sure if this is one that you're going to get to, but if you do, let me know what you thought of it.
Hey man, just getting back to you about one missed call now. I was thinking to try and mimic your accent and drop you a voice note of your impending death. But considering I've been a hypochondriac lately, if you did the same to me, I'll probably lose even more sleep. So I spared you an impersonation of you. This is how you know if we had actual production values of any kind. There would have been a snappy intro. Instead, you get a voice note 3 days later after you've seen it. But yeah, I've had this on my hard drive probably since you were in Morocco and watched the movie originally, because I have no other explanation how this has ended up on my hard drive. But yeah, when you were going to send me a copy over, I already had it. And when you were laying out for Spooktober what movies you're watching next, and I was looking at what ones I was interested in, for some reason I omitted it from my initial list because it was on my hard drive for so long. And you know, hard drives are like dirty laundry baskets. Seems like whatever is there, you just don't want to touch or go near, even if it is your favorite t-shirt. So with this movie, I don't think I would have liked it when it first came out. So this is quite a fascination for me. When I watch horror movies, one thing I really hate and just can't get past and get my head around is when spirits start using modern technology. And when I say modern technology, it's more technology that's become new or at least widespread in my lifetime. So for instance, a poltergeist turns a light on and off. I don't think that's ridiculous. But a poltergeist shows up on your laptop. I'm thinking, come on now. How's he getting into that laptop? And even though it's both a manipulation of electricity or something, I just can't get into that type of thing. I just, there's something about my sensibilities and technology and horror that I don't really like, because at that point I'm thinking, well, is this sci-fi now? Because technology's been implemented. And then if it is sci-fi, the rules, or rather lack of rules, of horror start coming into play. And like I said, it doesn't really make sense, but it's just very off-putting to me. I can't take it seriously. So with this movie, had I seen it in 2003, probably what was The Matrix, 1999, when everyone started having cell phones afterwards, it probably a bit too soon for me to like the idea. So watching it now, and especially the use of older technology and older phones, it's almost like something ancient and something retro, because at this point phones have been around so long, I can't really remember not having a phone. Well, that's not true, because I remember my childhood, but it's just like you said, it's like a fork. It's always been there as a tool, as far as I'm concerned, for a long time now. And while you mentioned there might be something of that technology phobia at the time. Oh, everyone has a phone now. They're going to be able to get you. They're going to be able to find you. And maybe that's there. As you said, it's hard to know if that was getting to something at the time, or just someone who's into horror thinking, wouldn't it be cool? Incidentally, the same feeling of panic whenever a character hears the phone ring in this movie is the same level of panic I hear anytime somebody rings my phone. As you know, we send voice notes to each other, and if you were to ring me, I think our friendship would very much suffer. So on one level, I can certainly relate to the feeling of anxiety on phones ringing, even if it is someone saying you're going to die. But at the same time, I viewed this movie through the lens of something much more historic at this time. Like, these phones are a relic now, aren't they? They're old phones that you can just have texts on. You have a very basic ringtone. There's very little you can do with these phones. And it's almost like the early genesis of a technology, so ancient in its illustration at this point, that it manages to circumnavigate the problem I usually have with horror ghosts possessing technology or using technology. I actually found it quite good at this time around. And even the now datedness of the phones in general plays into it quite a lot. And the fact that when they're trying to get rid of their phone, because obviously, as we know, the ghost picks that contact list and starts ringing the next person. There's a mad dash for people to delete their numbers from one of the person's phone book. To cancel your contract, you have to go into a shop to get out of your contract. To send a picture, as the ghost does at one point, it's a very grainy, early phone picture that you can barely see, which makes it a lot more creepier. So I got a lot of mileage out of it because of how primitive these mobile phone models are. So I'll be fascinated to know, when it comes to technology horrors in another 20 years, and once something becomes more prevalent and something that you think of without even thinking of, if you know what I mean. I'd like to revisit other ones, and you're the expert, so maybe that's something we can do in Spooktober next year, or as part of your teams and your requirements. That would be quite a cool one to implement going forward. I don't know if you've done it before, but yeah, certainly interested to look into that. Now, when this film starts off, it reminded me a little bit of Final Destination, or so I thought. I thought we were going to get a very strict rule format that could be followed in this movie. Like you said, where someone's on the phone and then they die while talking to that person. And then it's the next person that dies. I thought we were going to get something that I could hold on to. And the concept was a lot more scarier than I thought. And I really like the imagery of the dead person's phone being rung by a spirit and those numbers being dialed. That was a lot more haunting to me than would have been had I seen it at the time. Like I said, I would have found that laughable. Again, there is a bit of Paul Verhoeven in this at times, and technology gone mad and where we're going as a society. That's there. I don't know to what extent it's there, but it certainly can be viewed through that lens. And I think the movie and the concept is a little bit of a wasted opportunity at times as well. And it directly impacts the pacing of the movie. For instance, early on, we get that scene where someone gets a call and there's a missed number, and she explains that, oh, this person sounds like me. And it's raining, and we see her walking on the bridge. I actually like that scene, and like you mentioned, that CGI of the time of the metal, bit dated now, but it did remind me a little bit like death in Final Destination. I'm thinking, oh, maybe there's not on these people can do to avoid death. Cool. And then we get a little bit more like that, where the next person finds out and then they're stuck, and then all of a sudden she is on the phone she meets up with the guy in person, and he's got a message that's going to happen in 6 minutes. And then you're thinking, ooh, good, we're going to get another one right now. That's pretty cool. And he's gone in a minute. So the movie certainly uses the fact when characters are going to die and how soon they get the message to really play with the pacing, whether it's 3 days later, whether it's an hour later, whether it's a week later, or whatever it is. There's something about how they spread that out that interferes with the pacing a bit at times. Now, when one of the other characters finds out she's next on the list, and the TV crew get involved, and the exorcist gets involved, and there's a lot of charlatans involved, and it's very kind of, I don't know exactly what the word is, but it's very exploitative. You could imagine something in 2024 where there's this horrible concept of a show where we follow terminally ill kills as they try death-defying stunts that they always wanted to do, and they don't care because they're going to die. There's a bit of now about that kind of, let's watch somebody who's clearly going to die and get the best out of it and more bang for your buck. There is a little bit of that in it that came into my head slightly. I'm not gonna lie. It came into my head more when you said it, because you almost confirmed a fleeting thought I had. But I have to be honest, my first initial thought was, oh, it's quite cool that in this movie we get to see possession and we get to see death as a widespread nationwide affair, because obviously a lot of these horror movies and a little pocket of a town, or a little small suburb of a city, or a small village, all these crazy tales are very localized normally. So I don't know what happens in Final Destination again, but I think, don't they start thinking it's all suicide and it's dismissed? I've never really seen a movie where everyone gets on board. After a while, the detectives get on board and they're like, oh God, we really need to investigate this. There's not really any doubters. When we talked about Orphan not so long ago, you said one of your most hated tropes is that the husband or some figure gets in the way of believing them, and it's just like all you have to do is believe them and at least some of this will be resolved. Well, there's always something like that in a horror movie, whether it's a detective or a husband, a friend, a mother, father. There's always something or someone that's not believing. In this, that's totally out the window, which I really liked. It's a nationwide event. The detectives are all on board. There's no one really doubting this for long. And it made me a bit disappointed. And I guess this would back up your point more, where it's never really explored after that scene on the TV station where the woman's body gets contorted. They're saying, look, cut the commercial and what the fuck is going on? It's just pure chaos. We never really revisit that. And again, that would leave credence to your point that the movie's more interested in thinking, look where we are as a society when someone would really need help and we're trying to make it into entertainment. We're trying to exploit it. We're trying to put it on TV. We're trying to get ad revenue from it. I guess that would be more to your point, but I don't know. The tone wasn't quite there in terms of the craziness of it for me to fully pick up on that while I was watching it. For me, it was more exciting and interesting to, oh, what happens? How would people feel when they witness that? Would they all throw away their phones? Would they all not answer their phones? I think that would be good territory to explore as well. But the movie never really does that. And there's a trope in this. You might laugh at me because it's such a simple trope. I never realized how much I loved the trope until this movie. And I think it's particularly liked by me in horror movies. And that is, we get a mystery early on. We don't really know what's happening. There's some really crazy, unexplained paranormal stuff happening. But then a character shows up that already knows what's going on and already clued in. Now, you could say, and if it's done badly, there's Basil exposition. This person's in here to fill the gaps and things like that. But what I really like about it is it lends credence to the fact that there's a world going on that you don't know about, that we don't know about, but other people are going around involved in and trying to fix. And I like that trope so much because it just seems like the world is very much a magical and a fearful place before this movie has even began. And it's always been that way. And it's something you can go your life without seeing at all, or something that if it's unfortunate to knock on your door, then you're going to want to find somebody like this guy, that man whose sister got burnt. You're going to want that person to show up and fill you in and keep you alive. So I like that aspect as well. Now, I was talking about the pacing. One part of the movie that really brings the pacing to a screeching halt is our main character, the female character. She, straight after the TV station fiasco, gets the voice note, and it's very early on in the film, maybe at the halfway point, maybe a little bit before, I'm not entirely sure. And she gets the voice note, and you know she's going to be next. And I'm thinking, hold on a minute. Unless this movie makes a massive swerve we can't really have this happening anytime soon, and we can't really have her die, because that just leaves the man whose sister died. So this movie is going to slow down, isn't it? And I really thought I was correct that it slowed down drastically. In a way, it completely abandoned what I saw as a very good hook and a very good premise, because at that point, it's not really engaging with what it established early on in the movie. And then we go into what I guess call ghost investigation territory, trying to explain the motivations of the ghost. And I was a little bit less interested in that because it's quite generic to me. And I don't really get scared by these movies anyway. So I enjoyed the imagery of the hand slowly coming out and disappearing and creating a sense of almost disbelief at times. Very good use of contortionists and imagery, but doesn't really do it for me. You mentioned that. What did you mention? Yeah, you mentioned that you find it less scary the more you feel sorry for the ghosts, and you think that's a misstep. And like you said, if you're talking about Mike Myers' childhood, you're gonna be thinking of that instead of being invigorated and thrilled by him trying to chase after our heroes or whatever. I find it actually much more deeply disturbing that something could cause so much evil by not being evil. And again, like you, it gets a bit muddled for me where they introduce two kind of ghosts. So there's one ghost trying to ring the people and trying to have at peace, and that's the mother of the child who was both abused and abusing. She just wants to protect someone, so she's presumably calling people to protect them. But there's another spirit, and that's the girl who died from the asthma attack, who used to injure her sister to get attention and things like that. And she's the real villain of the story. But her motivations for hurting people, and you mentioned Munchausen syndrome by proxy. I don't really know much about Munchausen syndrome, but from my interpretation, the ghost wasn't really trying to kill anybody, wasn't really trying to hurt anybody permanently. She was trying to injure them so she could get attention and be the hero and bring them to hospital. So when she's pushing people down elevators, when she's stabbing people, when she's doing all these things, it's more due to psychologically fucked up reasons rather than that pure evil. So the fact that you could be put into a situation like this and there's a spirit absolutely messing with you, in fact, two spirits, for reasons not really directly got to do with you. One spirit is contacting you because she wants to make amends and save the daughter she could never save. The other daughter is wanting to injure you so she can continue acting out her pathology as a youngin. And that for me is actually much more deeply disturbing. That psychological ghouling is it takes me back quite a bit. There's just something much more disturbing about that for me than a ghost that just wants to fucking kill me, or a ghost that wants to kill me because I don't know why. This ghost isn't even trying to kill me. And there's some really good iconography in this movie as well. I like the sound of the inhaler that becomes a a telling tick of when the ghost is around, or maybe sometimes it's a jump scare or making us allude to the presence that the ghost might be there. I like the candies in the mouth of the victims that come out. That's explained later. These are some very good horror iconography. So the movie's a bit all over the place to me. There's a lot of good there. The pacing had too much of a halt that it never really recovered for me. I wasn't really scared. But a lot of very good ideas and a lot to like.
Hey, man. Yeah, really enjoyed listening to your voice note. There are lots of amazing points. You picked up on a lot of great details that I'd sort of forgotten about. But yeah, this film did scare the shit out of me the first time I watched it. It really scared me. And this time it didn't scare me, and it didn't scare you. So I'm not sure what might have just been like the perfect alchemy the first time around, but maybe there's something to do with like our ages like now compared to then, or maybe just that it was more of a contemporary movie. I'm not really sure, but I'm glad I revisited it because I enjoyed it the second time around, and then hearing you talk about it now and sort of thinking about how much is in this film, how many different things are in this film. It's a real special film that I'm glad that I've seen, and I'm glad to kind of have it in my back pocket as a film to recommend to people if under certain conditions. And like you said, that some of this iconography in this film, the inhaler sound effect, the candies in the mouth, particularly that inhaler sound effect, is just genius. It's got plenty of cool little J-horror tricks and images, even like the camera phone grainy picture that's sort of animating or whatever. Like it's good stuff. I've taken notes on your voice note there and like some of the points you raised, but I just want to start on the last thing, or sort of the last subject you were talking about of the motivation of the ghosts. Now, if it was just the mother and that was it, then I think this would be quite an easy to understand movie, because we get this twist where actually the mother is a presence, but there's also the daughter who turns out, like the older daughter who turns out to be the bad one. That makes it very confusing, and I don't think I have it straight in my head, and I don't think you have it straight in your head either, because you're saying that because this mother has a Munchausen by proxy fixation that she's trying to kill, she's trying to kill, or she's not trying to kill people, she's trying to injure people to then look after them. Is it not revealed later on that there is no Munchausen by proxy element to this, and that actually when we thought that this mother was hurting her child, that she wasn't doing that, and she was just bringing the kid to hospital and just trying to care for the kid, and that all of the harm that was done to the kid was done by her sister. If I'm right on that, then that would mean that there is no motive and sort of Munchausen by proxy motivation from the ghost, and that it's all just the daughter, the older daughter, who's doing this killing because she's a sadist essentially, and she's evil, and maybe the mother is calling people to try and save them because she's trying to save them from her daughter. Now, I'm not sure if that's correct. It's a bit muddled in my head, and I kind of wish it was a bit of a cleaner thing rather than a twist late in the day. But yeah, it's a bit all over the place in that regard. Probably could have been clarified a bit. But anyway, what you're saying about like you find it more scary when it's a sad story. And you mentioned there, one of the things you said is it's scary when something that isn't coming from a malicious, evil position can cause so much damage and terror and horror in the world, because it's almost like it's not even about people. You just need people to not be bad, and everything will be all right. It's like there is a darkness out there that goes beyond even just the motivations of a bad person. Now, in light of what I just said about maybe all of the killing is done by this horrible little girl who's like, she's a little girl, so, it's maybe not her fault, but she is a sadist and she's trying to hurt people. So maybe that's not quite accurate to this movie, but in a general sense, it is often the case where, like in The Sixth Sense, for example, the scares and ghost movies, I'd say ghost movies in general, the scares are not necessarily coming from a place of like the ghost wants to hurt you. It's more that the ghost wants to communicate you or wants to whatever. There's some sadness, something negative happened where in some horrible thing in the past, but then will sort of propagate more pain forevermore until it's resolved, and you find that scary. And I get that, like I do on a conceptual level. I kind of agree. I'm like, yes, what could be more scary than just pain and darkness and negativity being the baddie rather than the motivations of a single individual? And it kind of goes beyond something that could even be curbed by that person no longer being angry or bad or whatever. At the same time, though, I do find the scariest thing in horror to be an individual or individuals, I suppose, like a zombie movie. But for me, really, is just an individual is always the scariest, who wants to hurt you because, insert reason here, but basically they're trying to hurt you, and that's what their goal is. And so in a ghost movie, I'm going to be more scared of a ghost who wants to hurt you because they're bad. Now it can have like a traumatic horror to really sad kind of thing, but for me, I guess the Japanese movies, the more is revealed about what's going on with the family at this sort of crux of it, the more I'm like, I'm not scared of this little boy now. This little boy's had his parents killed in front of him or something, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just not, it muddles it up a little bit for me. But anyway, to be honest with you, I'm only sort of drawing that conclusion from a handful of movies. So maybe if I saw more Japanese horror movies and more ghost movies and stuff, I might feel differently. But it's something that I've noticed happen as I've navigated a few of these movies, where by the time we've gotten to the full exposition, the full detective stories being done, I'm like, you've taken away what I really like from a horror antagonist, which is like, they're just fucking kill them, you escape them or kill them because they're just pure evil. They've ruined that, so to speak, and they've replaced it with something that there's almost no baddie left, I think. Anyway, just getting back to some of your points there that you've raised. You said that you can you find it really camp when it's, or it doesn't really, you don't really buy it when it's a ghost manipulating modern technology, but you do when it's older technology, like flicking a light switch or something. I get that. I know it did definitely seem camp when, it's like, it's a haunted computer or something like that. Like, I just think that at this point, there's been enough of these movies out, like where a ghost is haunting a Zoom call or whatever, that I don't mind anymore. I've kind of lost that, but I do certainly remember feeling like, well, ghosts can't haunt a cell phone. It's such a known thing to us. We invented it. We just invented it a couple of years ago. It's not an old mystical device. And I think that's because we had seen so many films about, like, it's a haunted book, or it's an evil book like Evil Dead or whatever, or it's a haunted, I don't know, like a old antique dresser where all the drawers can come open and the knives can float in the air, and like it was all old-timey gothic shit. And that's because the fixation for years was on that kind of old antique gothic subject matter or iconography. So then when it was, they were doing it with modern stuff, it just felt a bit like, but that's not the ghosts don't do that. They don't get in your tablet or something. But I think at this point I've accepted it. I can roll with it. You mentioned that you have, when your phone rings, that you have a fear and anxiety of that. And so it almost like dovetails nicely with what's going on in this movie. I have the same. Like certainly, whenever my phone or my wife's phone rings, I'm like, oh fuck, the phone's ringing. Hopefully, it's just a scammer, so we can just hang up straight away. And I think as phone calls become more and more a thing of the past, and they more and more represent a negative thing, like it's some obligation you have, or it's a spam, or you just like to socialize in text message form or voice note form or on your own time, on your own terms, this film almost takes on a new shape. I think you refer to it almost like jokingly, but I do think as we move further and further away from the era where people had phone calls and that was a part of their social life, and now it's rarer and rarer that that is a thing. I mean, everyone still does it to an extent, but it's just shrinking and shrinking. I think for people, when their phone rings, it's an increasingly negative sound and an increasingly anxiety-inducing sound. So not that that's what's happening in this film, but it is interesting coming from the country that's like that, you know, famously about social isolation and distancing between people, and technology removing the intimate connection between people, and that creating, you know, neuroses and obviously suicide and all this kind of stuff. It's as technology like pushes us away from that real human embrace that we had 100 years ago or whatever, all living in a little village and seeing each other constantly and stuff. This film, whether intentionally or not, will continue to take on a new form, I would say, and have that fear of an incoming call and more of horror based around your contact list and stuff like that just become more and more potent, which is just an interesting way in which a film can age, I suppose. You mentioned the similarity with Final Destination. Yeah, definitely. They've both got that kind of fatalistic thing where the horror is both being killed, but it's also the inevitability of being killed. And in a way, you could say all horror movies have that, because if there's a killer on the loose, then, you know, you're scared of being killed. But there's something about your name is on a list, like it is guaranteed to happen. It's not, the killer isn't out there trying to get everyone in the world. It's not some wild maniac. The killer hasn't maybe left town or something. No, you are going to die. That is, it heightens the drama outside of the kill scenes, because like you might not be in a death scene, but you know that you're next, or you're kind of being targeted. And then, because in both cases, this and Final Destination, they can kind of kill you in any circumstance. You could be anywhere. You could have 100 people around you. It's death itself that's coming to get you almost. I mean, it's not literally in this movie, it's a ghost, but you know what I mean? That works well. I don't know how many movies could be sustained by that, because I've only seen Final Destination and this film. And I guess Ring is that as well, because it's kind of, you watch the videotape and then a week later you die. But it's something that can be used well, and I think is used well here. And you mentioned how this film doesn't have that trope of like, nobody believes me. There are a few characters who are non-believers, like the lead detective is a non-believer. The guy who falls into the elevator shaft says he's a non-believer, but it feels sort of like willful ignorance. You're right. The vast majority of the people in this movie are like, yep, this is it. Maybe it's because it's like in Japan, I don't know, there's more obsession with fiction, and it's like people can click into that easier. Like I've seen a lot of animes where something fantastical and magical comes along and everyone's like in society rolls with it pretty quickly. I love that element of this movie, that for the TV networks and everyone in the country is like, oh, this new thing. People are getting phone calls and then they're being killed by a ghost a week later or whatever, a few days later, and how little time they waste with like, this couldn't be possible. It's like, no, it's happened. Look, check, observe it. Like, it's happened a couple of times, and the jury's not out anymore. Like, we know this is a thing. it's so refreshing to see that, and it's done. They go so hard into it. It's almost like this film has like the opposite of that trope of nobody will believe me. This is like the everybody believes me extremity. And you're right that they drop that. It's not they drop it, but they drop the national emergency subplots halfway through the movie after that TV scene. And that was obviously for you. There's a big shift halfway through this movie, a big energetic shift. I don't think I've quite felt that. I felt that this film is constantly throwing new stuff at you. The first time I watched it, it was my favorite thing about it. This time, it's probably my favorite thing about it. But we get like that TV scene is just so epic and so many people involved. And it's so out of the blue and unusual. And then when that's over, then we're on an intimate little ghost detective thing, and then we're on a haunted hospital or wherever it is, like really intense. It just feels like it's constantly got new things to show you and new types of movies to give you. But hearing you talk about it, I can't disagree that when you find out that the main girl is next, and then you do the math of she can't surely be killed in like 2 scenes time, so the whole rest of the movie is going to be just her being next. It is a shift. I didn't notice that and I didn't mind it. I guess the alternative would be that there'd be maybe 1 or at the most 2 other people targeted between that point and her. I think 1 would be probably the maximum you could fit in and still have some plot and stuff and not just be overly repetitive. I like all of the stuff in the second half of the movie. The hands coming out of the cabinet and the detective stuff. I like the detective stuff. I like the hospital stuff. The very ending, I'm less sure about because I just don't really understand what's going on there. But yeah, it does draw things out. I actually thought, because I couldn't remember the movie much at all, when she gets targeted, I had some doubt about whether she was going to make it to the end of the movie. Japanese movies can do things that are outside of my sort of Hollywood formed expectations. So, and this film is Takashi Miike, who's like a real do whatever he wants type of guy. And yeah, the nature of this film itself kind of is that evidently throwing left turns at you repeatedly. So I wasn't certain that she would make it. I thought, are we going to get handover of who the main character is to this other guy? No, it's not that I thought that was probably going to happen, but it was at least a possibility to me. But yeah, I know that didn't bother me. They do drop the satire side of things. They drop that Paul Verhoeven commentary on media hysteria, exploitation, stuff like that. But again, I don't mind this film dropping things that are working well, because the thing I like about the film is that it is constantly giving you new types of movie. So yeah, the character you mentioned, the character who knows more, and how that's a trope that you've kind of come to love. I guess, yeah, it's in every adventure movie, isn't it? Like Morpheus in The Matrix, where you get like the main character knows nothing about the world, like Harry Potter, and then Hagrid comes along and he's like, look, there's a whole fucking world that you don't know about, and I'm gonna like bring you into that world. It's it certainly works. It's a good thing. I've seen it in many anime movies. I don't know if it's more prominent in Japan, or it's just because I'm thinking about a Japanese movie right now and then I'm like tracing through Japanese movies, but it certainly feels like I've seen that in a hell of a lot of anime. It's that sort of Peter Pan to Wendy type character of like, extend a hand and like, follow me. I'm going to show you this world, you know? So that is something that always works and does probably cut. It allows you to speed up through some stuff that maybe would be harder to show with the main character just discovering it all in situ. I think that covers everything that you had gone over. I'm glad that you've seen it. I'm glad that you liked it, and I'm glad that you caught up with it now. And it's interesting hearing that you say you'd maybe like it more now than back then. probably interesting to me because I had the reverse experience where I've liked it both times, but I was terrified by it the first time. So as a horror addict, I can never really like a movie more than being legitimately scared by it. For example, if you take some trashy, shitty horror movie where the acting's bad, the dialogue's bad, everything from filmmaking level is bad, but the scares are effective and it actually scared me quite a lot. I'm going to way prefer that movie to something like Hereditary, which is like a technical masterpiece, and the acting and the cinematography, and it's also gorgeous and all that set design and all that, but I didn't find it scary at all. So it's just my favorite thing I can get out of a movie is scares, and because this movie really scared me the first time round, I'll always look back at that as like the peak viewing of it. But yeah, glad you watched it. And yeah, I think I looked at the trailer there of the American one and wasn't compelled to watch it. And I think there's a sequel, a Japanese sequel potentially. But probably a whole franchise at this point, like a manga and all that. But yeah, anyway, I suppose that's pretty much all we can say about this film. Unless you have any final thoughts, let me know.
Hey man, just to clarify about One Missed Call, and for the record, I don't know if I have this right. I didn't realize how much it is open to interpretation until we both seem to struggle with what happened by the end of it, and I think it is a bit confusing. Now, for the record, this is my interpretation of it, and it could be completely wrong. I think we're originally led to believe that it's the mother that is hurting the kids. And as it turns out, the mother is one of the ghosts, but her reason for haunting and trying to be involved in the various people in the phone call is that she needed to feel like she's taking care of somebody. So she's trying to take care of the people who've got this death call. Even though, as it turns out, it was her daughter who was injuring the other sister. Now, I don't think we're meant to believe that the sister is a psychopath in the Mike Myers sense. I think we're meant to believe that the psychological profile of the sister is that she injures people so she is able to take care of them. And so I don't know why that is. It's a bit muddled. Maybe we can come to some kind of conclusion. And so the mother spirit is trying to stop people from being injured, and all she needs to be told is that she's a good mother. Hence, in the final few scenes when that rotted corpse is hugging, and she I think she says, I can't remember what she says at this point, but she gives the mother some validation, and that's the mother spirit's arc wrapped up. But what's going on with the sister is, I don't think she's trying to kill anybody. I think she's trying to injure people so she can heal them, because that's what she's done with her sister again and again. She made sure she was injured and brought her to hospital. I don't think she's trying to kill anybody. So when she's sending people down the elevator, when she's doing these things, that's just the manifestation of ghost her, if you will, continuing the pathology. So the fact that the candy is in the mouth of all the victims is she's trying to make them feel better after she's hurt them. And I think in the final scene, when the guy wakes up in bed and the now possessed female character, I can't remember her name, well, again, it's unclear, but my interpretation was she's now possessed by the little girl, and she's injured him and brought him up in hospital. So now she's found a new person to take care of and injure. And by taking the candy sweet, he's almost engaging in the psychology of the ghost in the same way of The Phantom Thread, what Daniel Day-Lewis did. And to clarify, what I find deeply disturbing isn't so much that the sorrow of it all, it's that you can be involved in something that has nothing got to do with you, where someone's acting out a pathology or someone's acting out some behavioral pattern as a ghost that you just happen to be in the middle of. I'll give you an example. So my cat might see a rat, and my cat's interpretation is she's playing with the rat. She's finding something to play. She's grabbing it, bringing it about, even might bring it as a present to me. And my cat wants the rat to stay alive because she's getting entertainment out of it and she wants to continue hunting and it's fun. So my cat sees a rat as fun, whereas the rat is being tortured. The rat is being absolutely toyed with in the most cruel, horrible way from the rat's perspective. But that's got nothing got to do with the stop stealing the, as my cat takes this opportunity to steal a fucking chocolate bar. Get away from that, you little beast. Um, yeah, so that's what's terrifying. And another example of that, actually, without giving spoilers away, because we're not actually talking about the movie. In Barbarian, there's a character, as you well know, that thinks she's taking care of other characters. From her point of view, she just needs people to take care of. But from the view of the people who are trying to escape that terrible place, they are being hunted down and traumatized by a complete maniac that they don't even understand why they're doing that. Us as the audience understand it. So what I find terrifying is not a Mike Myers or a psychopath that I'm going to kill you just cause I like it. It's that I'm trying to find comfort or act out something that will benefit my psyche in a completely left field way than would be thought, but it's still giving the same amount of torture and horror to the victim as someone like Mike Myers would. That is what I find really disturbing about movies like One Missed Call. So, hope that clarifies it a bit more. But again, I could be completely wrong because it does get a bit muddled at the end.
Yeah, completely unnecessary Barbarian reference there, because you fully clarified everything through the medium of your cat. Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I think it is a terrifying thing, and it's the backbone of the monster movie genre, whether it's Frankenstein or Jurassic Park or King Kong or whatever. I think that thing of like, it doesn't care about, it's not sadistic, it doesn't care about taunting you. It's such a dangerous entity that, like, its mere presence is almost certainly fatal. Forget about it requiring some sort of anger or axe to grind with you. That is scary, definitely. And there's plenty of movies which utilize that in a scary way. Obviously, like Barbarian and One Missed Call, if you tie that into some sort of really sad and sort of traumatic, horrible origin, then it becomes all the more uncomfortable and grotesque because you're grappling with fear and sadness at the same time. Yeah, that what you're saying about the young girl. So I didn't pick up on the fact that that big sister was actually essentially doing a Munchausen by proxy thing herself. I thought she was just wanted to hurt the little sister as a sort of you know, a lot of kids do this. They either hurt themselves or they hurt others because it's a way of imposing some sort of control over the world in a life that they might feel they don't have much control in. But when you mentioned the candy thing, the candy thing, actually, I didn't understand the significance of it. But if you're saying that the candy was that the little girl was hurting her little sister, is it little sister or little brother? I can't remember, but her little sibling, purely to then be able to make them better and comfort them, and put candy in their mouth. That is, that's like brilliant, and that's really interesting, and that raises questions about the mother character and the relationship between the mother and the big sister, and was she sort of providing a level of attention and care that she didn't get, or that she did get, or she didn't get in the right way. I think with foreign movies, certainly with Japanese movie, and Japanese culture is so foreign to us. It's not like watching a Spanish movie or something where there's so much commonality in the cultures. With Japanese movies particularly, I find it hard to pick up on subtleties a lot of the time. And I don't, sometimes I don't know whether something is deliberately ambiguous or whether it's supposed to be crystal clear and staring you right in the face to a Japanese audience, but I haven't quite picked up on it. And partially that's like not picking up on little bits of subtlety. It could also be like subtitle, not errors, but subtitling methods that aren't the way that I would naturally expect something to be articulated. But also part of it could be that there is things just mean something different in that culture. So, for example, someone could, in just to use this case, someone could be enacting motherhood in a way that's very alarming and bizarre to a Japanese person, but I don't even clock that that would be a weird way of conducting yourself or whatever. So, yeah, I often find with Japanese movies that I'll watch the movie and I'll understand less than 100% of it, and then afterwards I'll be reading about it and I'm like, oh, all right, okay, that's what that meant, kind of thing. Which makes me think that it's a bit of a missed opportunity that the American remake of this has such a bad reputation. Now, it could be good because there's certainly horror movies out there that are widely hated that are actually really good, or that I really like. I like One Missed Call, the Japanese movie, so much that I can't really see a way to me preferring a remake of it, even a Japanese remake, because I think just with the way this shifts around in its focus and all of the stuff that goes on in it, I think it's just done really well. But the thing that you could get with a American remake, for example, is just the American storytelling that I'm more used to, and maybe would hammer home some of these points. Like, I come away from this film understanding that there was a lot of pain and, breakdown of relationships and stuff in that origin story, but not having a full, clear grasp of it. And also the ending, where she's, like you said, seems to have taken on the role of that big sister character. It's a bit messy and it's a bit all over the place, to me, to my sort of Western eyes anyway. So I think there's a few rough edges that could be shaved off here. Maybe the appropriate thing to do, rather than making an American remake, is just like American filmmakers or Western filmmakers to be inspired by this movie and make their own thing that kind of draws from this. And I wouldn't be surprised if that has happened. I haven't heard it mentioned. Like, you often hear Ring and The Grudge being cited as influences or just influential works in general, whereas this one, I think it was somewhat talked about at the time, certainly enough to get an American remake, but it's definitely faded into obscurity, and now I never really hear people talking about it. But yeah, good analysis and good unpacking of that. It does, it deepens the film a bit for me. And I think if you're going to halfway through the film switch from like a breakneck paced, like haunting, mass killing frenzy movie into a quieter investigative drama, then it certainly helps if the story that they're uncovering has more depth and weight. So, filling in some of those blanks there, I think, strengthens the movie. So yeah, glad to have revisited it and glad to have discussed it, get my head around it a little bit more.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.